What's up everybody, welcome back. In today's video we're gonna have a look at the fire weapon event to make sure that everything replicates and is handled by the server. So right now we are just spawning a fix locally and we're doing a trace locally. So we're gonna fix everything up and make sure that the server is in control and the server will replicate everything to the clients. So let's just dive into it. We can do all of the setup in our character blueprint. So let's open up the character. And we already have some kind of a fire weapon event in here, but it's not really doing much for us. So we're simply going to get rid of it and build it up from the start. So let's just delete everything that's in here right now. And we're only going to keep the input action fire weapon. Now to start off, we need two new booleans. So let's create a new boolean, and the first one is called isFiring. And we want this boolean to be replicated. So on the right side, make it replicated. And then we're going to duplicate it. And we also need a boolean that's called isFireButtonPressed. And that's also a replicated variable, so that's good to go. Now the first thing we want to do if we press our fire button is check if we are already firing or not. So we're going to grab a branch and simply plug in the isFiring boolean. And if this is false, then we're going to tell the server that we want to fire our weapon. So we're going to create a custom event, and that's called server fire weapon. And we want this event to be replicated to run on the server. So make sure that you set it and do not forget it. And from the false bin, we can call the server fire weapon event. Now we're going to get back to this in a little bit. First we're going to do the released button over here. So if we release the fire button, we want to call a custom event, and that's called stop fire weapon. And again, this is set to replicate to run on the server. And for the stop fire weapon, all we want to do is set our fire button pressed boolean back to false. And then we can call the stop fire weapon event from the released bin over here. So we're not really making a difference between server and clients. So this is a local event, so this could be either the server or the client. And if the server would call a replicated event to run on server, that would work. So we don't really need to plug in a has authority node here and make a separation between the server and the clients. A server can call this event as well and it will work. So this is just a little shortcut. And we don't need to use the has authority node over here. So we have this set up. So if we release the fire button, the server is going to replicate this to all of the clients. Now let's start building our server fire weapon event. So the first thing we want to do is set both of the booleans to true in here. So let's drag both of those in and set them to true. And then for the actual firing, we're going to create a new function. So let's just do that right away. Let's create a new function that's called server bullet trace. And let's build this function first. So let me grab my notes quickly. So from here, because we are a third person character, first I'm going to do a line trace from the camera to determine where I'm looking at. And then I'm going to fire from the muzzle of the weapon to the point that I'm looking at. So we need two line traces to fire one shot basically. So first I'm going to do a line trace by channel. Line trace by channel. And we want to grab our camera component. And from the camera, we want to get the world transform. So get world transform. And if we have the transform, we can split the struct bin. So the camera location is going to be the start of our line trace. And then from the camera rotation, we can drag off and get the forward vector from the camera. So that's the direction the camera is looking at. And then we can multiply this vector. So multiply. And if you right click on the pin over here, we're going to convert it to an integer, and then we're going to multiply this with something like 100,000. So that's 5 zeros. And then we can add this vector to the beginning vector. So add the vectors together, and that's the end of our line trace. So right now I'm going to leave the channel to visibility. We're going to get back to this later. If we actually add some AI, we want to create a new trace channel, but that's not really something to worry about right now. So we have the first trace. This is the trace from the camera to the center of the screen to determine where the character is looking at, or the player rather. So the first thing we want to do is grab a branch in here, and we want to know if the trace actually hit something or if we shot straight into the sky maybe and there isn't any blocking hit at all. So that's what this pool tells us. If there was a blocking hit, this is true, and otherwise this is false. So we're going to drag off here and break the hit result. And then we want to create a local variable. So create a new local variable, and that's our local target location. And that's a vector. So if there was a blocking hit, we want to set the target location to the hit of the trace. So that's the location where the trace hit. And if there wasn't any blocking hits, we're going to use the end of the trace. So then we're going to plug in the trace end over here. If we have that set up, then we want to know if we are firing a shotgun or a normal weapon. So I'm going to plug in a branch in here, and I'm going to grab the isShotgun boolean and simply check it if we are firing a shotgun or not. So let's do the false branch first. So if this is false, we want to do another line trace by channel, and that's the actual shot that we're doing. So another line trace by channel. And from here we want to grab our weapon mesh from the character, and we want to get the socket location. And the socket that we want to get is the muzzle socket. So we have a variable in here with the muzzle socket name, so we can simply plug it in over here. And then this is the start of our line trace. And then we want to trace to the target location. So how are we going to get that vector? If we drag off the socket location, we can get a unit direction vector. And this will create a vector for between 2 points. So we're going to use the socket location as the starting point, and then the local target location as the end point of the trace. And then all we need to do is make sure that we extend this trace. Right now it's a unit direction, so it returns a vector with a length of 1. So we want to shoot a bit further than 1 unit probably, so we're going to multiply this with something like 100,000 again. So let's convert the lower pin to an integer, and that's 100,000. And then we can add this to the starting location, so that's the muzzle location, and that would be the end of our line trace. So that's the shot we are firing. And that's really all we need to do in here. So we're going to grab a return node, and we are done. Now for the shotgun branch, this is pretty similar, but we need one new local variable. So let's create a local variable, and that's our local shotgun shot count. So that's the amount of shots that's in one shotgun shell. So that's an integer. And then we want to drag this in here, and we're going to increment it. So look for increment int. If you use this macro, it will automatically save it, so you don't need to get it and then set it and add 1. So this is just a little shortcut macro. So we added 1 to the shot count, and then we're going to copy our line trace from here and paste it over here. But we want to make sure that we add a little spread to each of the shotgun pellets, and we're going to use a random unit vector cone in degrees for that. So if we have our trace over here, right before we multiply it with 100,000, I'm going to disconnect it. And this is the direction of our current trace, so I'm going to drag off here, and then I'm going to get a random unit vector. Let me see, random unit vector. Oh, come on. So random unit vector cone in degrees. There we go. So we can plug this into the multiply node again, and then over here we can specify how many degrees the cone should be that our spread is. So I'm gonna set it to something like 3 degrees, and that's the half angle. So we're gonna have a spread of 6 degrees in our shotgun shot. So you can make this a variable if you would like, but right now we're just going to use a fixed value. So this is the shotgun line trace, and then all we want to do right here is add a branch to check if our shot count is high enough or not. So I'm going to drag in my shotgun shot count, and I'm going to say if it's smaller than and plug it into the boolean, and then I'm going to use a fixed value again here. So you could use a variable that you plug into your data table if you would like shotguns with different shot counts. I'm just going to set it to 8, so there will be 8 pellets in one shotgun shot. And if this is true, then we want to loop back to the beginning, so to the increment int node over here. And if it's false, then we're gonna go back to our return node and we are done firing this shot. So there we have our Linetrace event. So we can compile and save it and go back to our event graph. Let me grab my notes quickly as well. So we can simply call the server bullet trace event over here. So we are already on the server. We have a replicated event that runs on the server, so we do not have to add any checks in here. All of this will always execute on the server. So we're going to make the server do our line trace. Then we're going to create a second custom event. And I'm going to call this something like a server fire weapon events. And we don't need to set the replication because the server is going to call it. So this will automatically execute on the server as well. So from here, I'm going to call my server fire weapon events. And we're going to get back to this in a little bit. Then I'm going to add a delay. And the delay is going to be the length of the fire time. So we can simply drag in the fire time of the weapon and plug it into the delay. And then we want to add a branch to see if we can continue firing our weapon. So all we want to do in here is check if we are an auto fire weapon. So we have a boolean for that, is auto fire. And if our fire button is pressed, so end boolean. And if we still have the fire button pressed, then we're going to continue the loop and keep firing shots. And if it's a single shot or we are not pressing the button anymore, then we're going to stop firing. So true loops back to the beginning. So that's to the server bullet trace over here. And if it's false, then we want to set our booleans back to false. So let's clean this up a little bit. There we go. And if this returns false, then we want to set our is firing and is fire button pressed bools back to false, and then we are done in here. So this will make the server do our line trace, and now in the server fire weapon events we can handle stuff like the Muzzleflash and Firesound and things like that. So because we are already on the server here, we do not need to add any hash authority checks and things like that. We can simply call a multicast event from here to make everything work. So for example, we already have a fire weapon montage event. So if I'm going to drag off here, and first I'm going to grab a sequence node. And the first thing I want to do is play my fire montage, and I can simply call the multicast event right away. So we have a multicast fire montage. And I'm going to call it right here because I'm the server. So if I'm going to look over here, we have the play fire montage event and then the server fire montage event as well. We can get rid of those because we don't need them anymore. The only one that's ever going to call this event is the server, so we only need our multicast event. So let's get rid of the other ones. And the reloading, we're going to get back to that in another episode, but I do want to set up the Firesound. So we're also going to create a multicast event. So that's custom event, multicast play Firesound. And we need to set it to replicate as a multicast event. And then we can simply play a sound at location. So drag off here and play sound at location. So for the sound, we can drag in the variable that we have available, our Firesound that's stored in the data table. And for the location, I'm going to use the weapon mesh location. So I'm going to drag in the weapon mesh component and say get world location. And that's where I want to play the sound. So plug it in over here. And I'm going to lower the volume a little bit by default. There we go. So we can call this event from the sequence as well. So let's call the Firesound. And let me see, we can also add the Muzzleflash in here. So if we would create another custom event, and that's called multicast Muzzleflash. Again, we need to make sure this is a multicast event, and then we can spawn an emitter attached. So spawn emitter attached. And for this, we want to attach it to our weapon mesh. So we can drag in the attach component weapon mesh. We can use the muzzle socket name variable that we have available as well. And for the Muzzleflash, we also have a variable. Yes, we do. So the Muzzleflash FX particle system, we can plug it in as well. And then you want to make sure that for the location type, you set it to snap to target and keep world scale or including the scale, whatever you want for your FX. But I'm going to use the snap to target function. And then we can call this multicast event from the fire weapon events over here. So I'm going to add another pin to the sequence and simply call my multicast Muzzleflash. And that should work as well. So now we have the fire montage, the sound and the Muzzleflash replicated, and the server will do the line trace instead of the client. And everything should pretty much work, I think. So let's just have a look at how this goes. Let's compile it and press the little play button. No, that's a bit too big. There we go. So right now, if I fire my weapon, the sound is not replicating. Okay, so let's dive back into the character blueprint. I know if we go to the begin play event over here, so the first time the server assigns a weapon, we need to add a little delay, otherwise the character of the client is not loaded, so it's not replicating. So that's only at the start of the game. If we set up the weapons, we want to add a little delay. So normally we would have a 3-second countdown, so there wouldn't be any issues. We can do it inside the 3-second countdown before the level starts. So right now I'm gonna add like a 2-second delay over here and then make the server hand out the weapons. And that should fix the replication. So you can see the client is firing the weapon. You can see a muzzle flash on both screens, although the screen is a little bit small, but I think you can see it. And you can hear the sound, so that's replicating as well. And if I switch to the server, you can see it's replicating to the client. So right now I'm using a single shot weapon and I cannot auto fire. If I switch to my rifle, I actually have an automatic rifle. And if I would switch to my shotgun, then I would fire a spread. But to make sure that we actually see what we're firing, we need to enable the line traces. So let's go to the server bullet trace, and for the last two over here, if you set the draw debug type to duration, then you can see the traces on the server. So let's have a little look. So I'm gonna grab the client, and right now if I'm firing, you can see on the server screen it's doing the line trace for me. And if I switch to my automatic rifle, I can fire automatic. And if I switch to my shotgun, you can see a nice spread go for my shotgun shot. So all of that is working and it's being handled by the server and then replicated out to the clients. So we have it set up for server authority as well. So this is our little HUD error, nothing to worry about here. So in the next video I want to make sure that we also replicate an impact FX, and then we're going to set up the ammo and the HUD for the local clients. So for now we are done. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, and you're welcome to join the GameDev Raw Discord if you have any questions or just want to talk game dev stuff. Thanks for watching everybody. Talk to you later. Bye bye.